It's also really an honor to be here with Alan and Pamela. Both of them are great leaders, and great leaders in the deepest sense, which is they both created platforms that allows thousands of other people to take leadership roles. Through City Year and through Universal Giving, many other people can discover hidden resources of strength and agency that they never knew that they possess. And that's really what the deepest form of social change is releasing the potential that other people don't even know that they have within themselves.
Imagine what our country would be if we all felt like we held an office. And we swore that oath to the Constitution and to that mission of America to form that more perfect union. What would our country be like? And if obviously, hopefully people would be involved in service, but also involved in politics. It's part of the reason I finally, I decided to jump into that Senate race a year ago. And involved in movements for change. And to try and stir that notion of, it is big citizenship, it's people getting involved.
As a social entrepreneur, to really become an effective social entrepreneur, one of you said that it's almost like you have to do it. There's just a drive to do it. And I would say it is not a choice. I mean, when I was starting Universal Giving, I had billboards up in my room that I put, "You will not give up." And I was shaking in my boots, but I did not have a choice. I did not feel I had a choice to start Universal Giving. No matter how much fear, no matter how much concern I had, it was so clear to me from my life experiences and my personal stories that this is where I needed to go.
So let me introduce to you my co-panelists. Furthest to my right is David Bornstein. David is a journalist, and he is really one of the, I think, if not the leading expert, certainly has to be one of the leading experts on the subject of social entrepreneurship. He has written extensively on the subject. One of his first notable books was The Price of a Dream, the story of the Grameen Bank. And next to David is Alan Casey. And Alan Casey certainly must qualify as one of the leading social entrepreneurs in the United States and in the world. He may be best known to you as a political candidate or as the founder of City Year, but he's a favorite son here in Massachusetts, so we're so glad to have you. He's on the road quite a bit because he's just published a book called Big Citizenship. And then right next to me is Pamela Holley, and she's also a leader in the social entrepreneurial revolution. She's the founder and CEO of Universal Giving. And this is an internet platform which provides direction and opportunity for people to give and volunteer with top-performing social projects throughout the world. Essentially, what Universal Giving does is to vet and explore all these different initiatives in the world and to match people who want to get involved with that project, which would be best for them, most suited for their objectives and ideals and interests. David, if you could get us going with just giving us a perspective on what this all means in our world today, social entrepreneurship.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's really an honor to be here. As a journalist who really focuses and believes that the role of journalism is both to inform us about problems, but also to help us understand how to construct a better world. We need to do both those things for social change really to happen. It's really an honor to be here because this is really, I guess, the home of solution journalism. I mean, for more than 100 years, the Christian Science Monitor has been doing something that very few publications have done globally, which is to lead by showing really how society can, as you said, heal itself, and not just letting us know what our deficiencies and shortcomings are. And it's a very, very key role, and I was kind of amazed to discover that Mary Baker Eddy founded it when she was 87, because if she had passed away at 86, the field of journalism would be very different. It's also really an honor here to be here with Alan and Pamela. Both of them are great leaders, and great leaders in the deepest sense, which is they both created platforms that allows thousands of other people to take leadership roles. Through City Year and through Universal Giving, many other people can discover hidden resources of strength and agency that they never knew that they possess. And that's really ultimately the deepest form of social change, is releasing the potential that other people don't even know that they have within themselves. So it's wonderful. opportunity for me. I mean, the field of social entrepreneurship is sort of a new field. Like any new field, it has borrowed its language from an existing field until it invents its own language. So we use the word entrepreneur because most people seem to know what that word means. And it's when I talk about social entrepreneurship, many people have different sort of definitions of it, but it's people creating structures that advance social change with an element of dynamism in it. It doesn't have to be a business. It can be a nonprofit. It can be a hybrid. You find a lot of people who are sort of working in this gray area between business and the nonprofit world. It can also be working through governmental agencies as what we call intrapreneurship, where you come into an existing agency, a hospital, a government agency, a school, and you transform the way that agency works from within. We have, the United States is a very institution-rich society, and we don't always have to create a whole bunch of new institutions. We have a lot of old institutions that really need to be revamped from within, so, and a lot of companies too. So when you think of social entrepreneurship, think of also how can you change the company in which you work or the agency in which you work. So it's a very broad idea. And what I want to mention are just sort of 3 points. Is like, why is this new, or is this new? Why should it be relevant to everybody in this room? And ultimately, what's the story that I think as a journalist is not yet being told, or is not being told very well? So the first thing is, why has the field of social entrepreneurship come along now at this sort of point in history? And it's clear to me, well, I would say, it's always clear to people who think it's their idea, but it seems clear to me that there are these really powerful historical driving forces that have made it possible for much larger number of people around the world and in the United States to essentially shape their own lives, but also their societies, to actually make a change. And so what are some of the things that have made it possible just in the past, say, 30 or 40 years? Well, one of them would clearly be the women's revolution. The fact that half of the people in the world, in most countries, not in all countries, have much greater degrees of freedom and much greater options and a different sense of perhaps what their role should be. Many of the social entrepreneurs I've interviewed in Brazil and India, if I went back 20 years, they wouldn't have envisioned that role for themselves. They would have envisioned a much more traditional role. So the women's revolution is a huge change. The education revolution is an enormous change. In the 1970s, the number of universities in the world doubled just in that decade alone. And it's accelerated in many, many parts of the world so that you have millions, hundreds of millions of people now who have the opportunity not only to go to secondary school, but to go all the way through college. And you have far more, the growth of the middle class in developing countries has spread. Money, of course, moves across borders and is much more fluid than it used to be. And of course, global media, where you have ideas. It used to be that in order to prevent ideas from entering the Soviet Union, you actually had to stop cassettes from getting into the country, because that's the way ideas were traveling. It's pretty hard to do that now. So you have all of these things. And at the same time, there's this ability for people to be powerful because of access to education, also because of longer lifespans, all sorts of things. You also have this perception globally that the existing institutions really are not solving the most crucial problems of our time in history. So governments have not really addressed global warming, for example, or the fact that there are still, 1 billion people who go hungry. In the age of the iPad, we have people still going hungry. It just doesn't make sense to thinking people. And so this sense that the institutions that we've created and we've lived with for decades just have not solved the problems. And our businesses have ignored many problems. We just have not structured businesses that can do things like bring food into the inner cities at an affordable price. So we have food deserts all across the United States where low-income people literally don't have a vegetable within 3 miles. Really crazy problems that the institutions haven't solved. So the brain is a survival mechanism. It evolved basically to solve our survival problems. And so a lot of people look at these problems and they say, hey, we have to invent new institutions. And they also have this power to organize themselves using technology, and they're able to get access to information. So you sort of have these sort of two curves. The supply of people who can be change makers has increased, and the demand for their services has increased. And that's why I think you see this sort of global explosion today of what you can think of as freelance change makers. Or Nicholas Kristof wrote an article in the New York Times Magazine 2 weeks ago, I believe, where he called it do-it-yourself foreign aid, where he profiled 4 young women who had sort of gone out and created their own institutions to solve problems that they saw. So do-it-yourself, Home Depot, World, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people are saying, hey, this is something I can do. It's something that actually allows me to align my talents, my interests, and genuinely have an impact in the world. So it's quite fulfilling, and the world really needs this to happen. So there's many reinforcing factors. The reason why I think this is really relevant for just about anybody, because whether you're a student or a policymaker or a business person or a doctor or a lawyer, the way that problems are being solved today in the world it is changing dramatically. The way we're organizing the solutions is changing dramatically, and in some ways the expectations for what it takes to be a really powerful person in the world is shifting, in the sense that where the solutions are, we can no longer sort of look to academia or the government and say the solutions are there. The solutions are maybe scattered in 100 different places. So for individuals who want to be actively engaged in the life of their society, understanding how the field of social entrepreneurship is producing a lot of these new institutions and new career paths and opportunities is really the place where you can really tap into the core vitality of the world today. So I would argue that it's probably the most exciting place to look for what is going to happen over the next 10 years that really is going to shift things. As a journalist, I often sort of compare journalism today as it's practiced to bad parenting. I have a 7-year-old son, which is to say that if he woke up every morning and at the breakfast table I reminded him of all his shortcomings, all the mistakes he made yesterday, so that he would become a better person, I would be a really bad parent. Well, what are we doing here? We're basically saying that the way to change society is to point out its shortcomings and to criticize it and to expose the wrongs and to expose the scandals and the corruption and all that, which is pretty much the bread and butter of journalism as it's practiced. It doesn't have to be that way. Almost all behavior change is aspirational. It usually requires that people see a path in front of them that makes sense to them, that's attractive, and that is doable. So when you think about how do you actually change society, if we have all of these problems with our education system, with our judicial system, with our political system, with corruption in politics or access, the effect of money in politics, we can't just write about them every day and say, we have this problem, we have this problem, we have this problem. We need to let people know what the potential, if not proven, at least the potential pathways are to solve these problems. And we need to do it just as much. It's said that the reason why King Solomon was so wise was because he had memorized 3,000 parables or aphorisms. And he had all this wisdom that he had sort of accumulated, and then in a given moment he could deploy it. He could figure out which wisdom was necessary to call upon. Doctors or a good clergyman will have seen many social problems over the course of his life, human problems, and then when you come to him for guidance, he says, oh, I've seen this pattern before. I've seen people who have suffered this way before. I think I can draw upon their experience. In the same way, I think it's up to journalists to help people understand the patterns in society, the potential new institutions and new models that are emerging that could help address the problems that they report on every single day. And so that if you have this balance of both being aware and well apprised of the serious problems and also having a sense of the different pathways that are available for solving those problems, it could create a lot of excitement rather than what we see, which is a lot of apathy, a lot of people turning away from the public space, turning away from the commons and focusing on the backyard, which is the area where they can exert control. My home, my kids, my private school, and not the public domain, which is where we really need to invest our efforts. This is what Alan writes about, so eloquently in Big Citizenship. The citizen, taking the role as really helping to correct the society. I think I know in my experience as a writer, as a journalist interviewing people, there's a tremendous untapped yearning among people to be able to play an active role in fixing the world. And what is often missing is that people don't see that they can make a difference. They don't believe that it's possible because they don't have enough examples in their head of people who have actually solved problems. If they heard, they all know 100 business entrepreneurs who have started Apple Computer and Microsoft. Everyone can name a dozen entrepreneurs who started with $10 and now are worth $100 million. But very few people can name 10 social entrepreneurs who started with $10 and created an organization that's helping hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people, or a few hundred people, or maybe just a community, whatever. Very few people have those examples loaded up in their brains to let them know that the pathway is available to them, that it's an exciting and fulfilling one. So that's kind of I think the big, the hidden landscape that is now, that we live amidst. And I think part of the big, one of the things that I would like to help contribute to is making some of that more visible for people so that they can figure out how to navigate it for themselves.
Jonathan, thank you, and thank you for the very kind introduction. And as David said, it's a real privilege and honor for me to be on this stage with David and with Pamela, two outstanding leaders. And I think what you just, all the writing that David's done and what you just said is so refreshing. Just say amen to everything you said. I'm going to talk a little bit about, try to build off of that, and just, as Jonathan said, I just did write this book, and I'm going to try and give you a little sense of why I wrote it, and what I've learned as a social entrepreneur and somebody who's been in the service movement. I wrote the book firstly out of a sense of gratitude, because what I've found that beyond meeting my extraordinary wife, Vanessa Kirsch, who's also a social entrepreneur, and the birth of my kids, there's been nothing more rewarding, more valuable, more empowering in my life than having a dream to try to make a difference, and then working with other people to see that, who you share values and ideals with, to see that dream happen. And Jonathan was very gracious. I get introduced as the co-founder of City Year along with Michael, and get all this acknowledgement for what City Year has become. And the truth is, City Year has hundreds of co-founders. The truth is, what Michael and I did was just tap into a spirit of public service, a spirit of idealism, a spirit of people who want to be part of causes larger than themselves. It's like David said, what I found is most people really do want to be part of trying to change the world in whatever way they can. And we were just lucky we tapped into that. I think it's always there. And, 2 quickly became 4, and then 4 became 8. And the truth is, what really made City Year happen was that there were young people, like the one sitting in this audience today, 22 years ago, who stepped forward. And this was at the height of sort of the me generation. My generation was branded the me generation. We rejected that. It's part of the reason we started City Year. Who stepped forward and said, I'm going to give a year of my life. And that's really what made it happen. Part of the reason I wrote the book is from my experience in these movements is I think we need a different approach. We need a new governing philosophy, if you will, a new public philosophy that is different, that's more attuned to the 21st century. And David's right. This is, in some ways, there's always been social entrepreneurs, but there's something that's been happening over the past 30, 40 years, and I think you put it in great historical perspective. And so, I think we have to remind ourselves of what President Lincoln said. At a time of greater crisis, at the height of the Civil War, when we literally came apart and were killing each other, Lincoln said this: "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. Our occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise to the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." Social entrepreneurs wake up every single day thinking anew and acting anew. They don't take the world as it is.
I think one of the things that Alan has mentioned is really about it can be the norm that people take action. And that's very much the vision of universal giving. It's to create a world where giving and volunteering are a natural part of everyday life. We look at it and we say, if you can pay for your cell phone, it's that important for you to text, then it's that important for you to volunteer. I mean, my goal, I'll feel like I will have completed universal giving when everyone gets their cell phone bill, their heating bill, and their volunteer registry of where they volunteered each month. That it's that important you think about it on your kitchen counter as that being something that important that you're recording. I think that when you look at being a social entrepreneur, what Alan and David have talked about, what you really need to do at the beginning, whether you become the Mother Teresa or not, and I would argue that every single act does make you a Mother Teresa. That sense of love and giving of your time, giving of your thoughts, giving of your talents and interests, everyone has that capability to be that. And I just say, before I kind of go into my presentation, I will share with you a brief story that I wrote called Philanthropy at the Dry Cleaners. Because I was rushing to get to work so I could do good, and I came into the dry cleaners and just came in and gave my ticket and rushed out, and just all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, am I someone who gives from 9 to 5? And do I check out at 5 p.m.? Who is this woman? The next time I came in there, I found out her name. Her name is An, A-H-N. She's from Vietnam. She has children. She's been running this for about 13 years. We had a conversation, and I was present with her. Part of giving is being present with your time, present in any interaction, and whether you're walking down the street or speaking with homeless people, it doesn't always have to be a formal volunteer opportunity. So I think, we can really look at giving. For me, it was a big lesson learned that here I was going and being, energetic social entrepreneur, but I was not giving to that person right in front of me. And what an opportunity that means, that giving is completely democratic and available for everyone. You can be doing that at every moment. And I'd say that extends too to our family and our home first. How you treat your partner at home, how you treat your roommates, your children, the people in your apartment building. We really have to take service to not just the formal opportunity, but at first serving the people who are around us. And I do watch that as a social entrepreneurship professional, that we're not just only doing formal activities, but we carry that principle of loving and giving in our lives. So I think as a social entrepreneur, to really become an effective social entrepreneur, one of you said that it's almost like you have to do it. There's just a drive to do it. And I would say it is not a choice. I mean, when I was starting Universal Giving, I had billboards up in my room that I put, "You will not give up." And I was shaking in my boots, but I did not have a choice. I did not feel I had a choice to start Universal Giving. No matter how much fear, no matter how much concern I had, it was so clear to me from my life experiences and my personal stories that this is where I needed to go. And that's ideally what you can find. Now, I'll be honest with you, I left 4 jobs in, I think, about 18 months before finding that. So don't be daunted by the different pathways you have to take to find that unique pathway for you. But it's about your personal story. And we hear a lot about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and we'll talk about that as well. But the concept I'd like to introduce to you today is PSR. It's personal social responsibility. We start with that first. We don't have to rely on companies to just do good. We start with our sense of social responsibility first. And for me, that is me in the red shirt at age 12 in Mexico with Mom, Dad, Allison, my older sister, who will not forgive me for continually showing this picture, and our Mexican friend, who I don't remember his name. And we were on a family vacation in Mexico. And I will tell you, one of the things that Alan spoke about was that it takes a team. And one of the things I would encourage to budding social entrepreneurs is that team is not only your paid team, it is your informal advisors and network. It could be your family, it could be an old friend. Make sure you have those informal advisors not formally associated with your organization to support you as you launch your venture. I believe you'll need that, not just a good team. It's a team outside and a team inside. And my team have definitely been Alex and Wally in this photo. They have been married 47 years. They are best friends with a spark, and they are 2 of my best friends. And I go down every Sunday and spend my full Sunday with him. I do not work on Sundays, and we just spend our days walking and having meals together and being present with each other. They have supported me unconditionally, and you need to find those kind of support networks in your life. And when you do, you also realize you're not the only person launching your venture. It is a village that's launching your venture, and to be respectful of that. Well, we were in Mexico, and my dad and I were at a marketplace where they were selling gifts for tourists, and we walked down this cul-de-sac. And at the age of 12, I saw every begging, starving, maimed child, dirty, unwashed. And I was just holding my dad's hand, and I just said, how can this be? How could you not tell me this? And he said, honey, you're 12. And yet at that point, this is what flashed across my mind. I could not accept that. And from that day on, I just went and started volunteering in East Palo Alto, giving out clothes, working with people who were on AFDC, which is now TAMP welfare payments, working in handing out meals, whatever I could do. When I got to Duke, I saw a need there that people didn't know about the deaf community and sign language. I went to Gallaudet. I learned sign language in the elementary levels and taught it at Duke. When I got older, I started volunteering abroad. And so what happened is this concept of something that was unacceptable. I would encourage you to try to find what's unacceptable to you. What is that? And there's no right or wrong. It could be human rights. It could be animals. It doesn't have to be as drastic as human poverty. It can be rights for women in your local community. It doesn't have to be international either.
We do have to end, but I did want to ask each of you very quickly. We often associate idealism with youth. But if you could just very quickly tell us, how has idealism emerged, changed in your lives? What has been, how has it grown? Or has it grown? Has it diminished? I mean, so often we think that idealism is just the province of the young. Tell us about how the idealistic spirit what has been its journey in your life, in one sentence or less.
Well, I'll start. The dictionary definition of idealism is forming ideals and living under their influence. And yes, it's associated with youth. And what I've often said to people is, if you stay idealistic, you'll stay young. Bobby Kennedy said, youth is a state of mind, it's not a time of life. And so I've actually become more idealistic over my life because I've actually seen things happen that most people said weren't going to happen when we first started working on them, because of the collective effort of people. And so, I've had too many experiences where, breakthrough things have happened. So I become more idealistic. But, people who are younger tend to be, more open to it. But I'll tell you, one of the most idealistic people I know is 83 years old. His name is Harris Wofford. And he was involved in, he fought in World War II. He marched with Dr. King. He helped to start the Peace Corps. He helped to get Jack Kennedy elected. He became senator. He helped to make AmeriCorps happen. He was a college president. He's 83. And he is still, going strong on, using every minute he's got to try to make a difference. So I think it is a state of mind. And it's if you have ideals that you care about and you try to live under their influence, you can stay idealistic. And it also makes you happier, I think.
For me, it's evolved. I'll give a quick example. Universal Giving, we were redoing our mission and our values. And I immediately stopped the process with my team because I realized I hadn't done it for myself. I hadn't revisited my mission and values. They were kind of tucked away. And I thought, wait, I need to take my PSR, my personal social responsibility first. And as I went through my values, they changed radically from when I was younger, which was enthusiasm and joy, and which is nothing wrong with that. But as now my values include things such as presence, being present with people. One of my values is listening. One of my values is purity, because one of the things I try to do, not just at night, but throughout the day, is empty my mind of anything that might build up, that might be a resentment, that might be something negative. That's how I renew. And so I guess I don't really think as much about the term idealism, but I do think about renewal often, and about clearing out my mind of anything that wouldn't help me be progressive, positive, idealistic in my life. And so I do think about purity. Now, that doesn't sound like idealism, but I'm going to go with that. So,
yeah, David, how has it advanced and transformed in your experience?
Yeah, it's really, what a good question. The phrase, from Kennedy's inaugural speech, where there's a generation that's been tempered by the Cold War. and having had that experience is in a position perhaps to do something, to think anew. When I interview people who are causing social change today, I see them as sort of tempered idealists, which is to say they are aware of the limit. I mean, too often idealism, when it's kind of divorced from reality or pragmatism, can very quickly fall into cynicism when those ideals are not met. You protested, and nothing happened, let's say, for example. It's very easy. And I think what I see today, especially among a lot of young people, but I also see it particularly among the encore career generation, people in their 55 to 85 or 95 years who are sort of reinventing their careers, realizing that they have another 30 years to live and that you just can't play that much golf, So, this idea that sort of recovering it. But I think what I see is people whose experience has been tempered by having seen the war on poverty and having seen the war on drugs and the war on cancer and the war on terror and all of these things, and having a much more sort of healthy and pragmatic appraisal of what's possible, and still persisting in trying to solve problems, even though there's a lot of evidence out there saying it's very difficult to solve problems, and yet still going on, and also realizing deep in their heart that change is not merely saying that you don't like what you see. It's not merely an act of protest. It's inherently a constructive act. We must build things if we want the world to change. We must actually think creatively and construct things. And also, so idealism wedded to that constructive impulse is the biggest change that I'm seeing. And also, the last point, which is this quote that has always struck me from Saint Francois de Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince, which is that a single event can awaken within us a stranger totally unknown to us. To live is to be slowly born. And so to be open to the idea that, and like the quote over there, that we don't know yet who we are because we don't know yet what we will do in the future.
Well, that's a wonderful way, I think, for us to end. And I look forward to sharing a future of social change and new visions in social change with everyone in this room and everyone in our global community. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again.